yesterday from the BBC. And the boss of one of the region's most successful fashion firms says he would still vote to come out of the EU, despite a visit from a senior figure leading a campaign for Britain to stay in.
The former Home Secretary, Alan Johnson, who's heading Labour's In campaign, toured the clothing company's factory at Alfreton in Derbyshire. But the managing director remains unconvinced by his arguments. Mike O'Sullivan is at the factory now. Mike, good evening to you. So, just how important is Europe to this firm?
Well, and it's a very important market for this family firm, the late shift here at David Nieper tonight. But they say there's nothing to fear from leaving the EU family. And they say red tape surrounding this humble stepladder has informed their thinking on the EU.
Your office is in Germany and Switzerland and France.
Yes. Alan Johnson on Europe. But even he couldn't convince the managing director of this fashion firm that the company would be better off staying in the EU. Mr Johnson visited the David Nieper factory in Alfreton as head of Labour's In campaign.
Some of the issues that concern textiles will happen anywhere in the European Union and will affect us whether we're in or out. The only difference is if we're out, just like Norway, just like Switzerland, just like Iceland, just like Liechtenstein, they trade with Europe, they pay to be members of to the European Union to trade, but they have absolutely no say in their regulations, and I think that's a very important part of us staying in.
David Nieper employs around 250 people making high-quality women's wear. It exports around a third of its goods to Europe, France, Germany, Holland and Switzerland in the main. And believe it or not, it's EU regulations concerning things like the stepladder that's convinced this fashion firm that they're better off leaving Europe.
We have to have somebody who comes to check this stepladder every month. So they have to count the rungs. 1, 2, yes, it's still got 3 rungs. And then fill in a form, tick a box, and comply with another piece of EU legislation. Now, for a business like us, this is about as useful as the laws about vending carrots or straight bananas.
David Nieper claims its customers in Europe would still buy its garments, even if Britain was outside the EU. And if Britain remains in, it claims small to medium-sized businesses have very little influence on EU regulations. Well, David Cameron has negotiations over EU reform next month. The referendum must be held by the end of 2017, but the Labour In campaign is saying if they don't come to places like this to speak to businesses who've got the other view, they just won't win the argument.
OK, Mike, thank you. Be careful leaning on that step ladder now.
Has he got the right number of steps?
I think it might have done.